Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. What's the point of all this technology without a little love in our lives? Our hosts, Tatiana Moroz, Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and Lauren Kasovitz, have come together to bring you Proof of Love. Go to proofoflovecast.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. Josh is ditching me today because he's got to take care of his wife, I guess. I don't know. I guess he's a caring kind of person. But I am happy to be here today, nonetheless, with you guys watching the Tatiana Show, because we have a return guest today. And it's somebody who I feel is very insightful. He's sort of got his finger on the pulse. He's always kind of at the cutting edge and doing a lot of new stuff. So we're going to be talking to Bruce Fenton of Satoshi Roundtable, if you've been invited. You also may know him as the CEO of Chainstone Labs. And he's also working with Watchdog Capital, a registered broker-dealer. He's got Atlantic Financial and a whole bunch of other stuff. You have been in the crypto space for quite a while. And I don't know, welcome back to the Tatiana Show. We're going to talk about all things blockchain today.
Thanks a lot. Great to see you again.
Yes, awesome to see you too. So before we kind of get started, tell me a little bit about how has COVID hit you and your family? How have you been? What's going on?
Well, I think it's similar for everybody. A lot of change, a lot of, things to get used to, a lot of, it's a changing world, but also a changing lifestyle. We're very lucky because we're remote. I was kind of panicky pretty early on about it. I was really worried about the, just facing an unknown thing, not knowing how bad it was going to be. I knew something bad, and it was. I mean, one of the worst things has been the reaction and overreaction by the governments, but it is what it is, and we faced it. But we were lucky to be in a rural area. It's much better than being in New York City or something like that, being in New Hampshire. So that was pretty good. But I'm really interested in how the world has changed and what's unfolding, and hopefully there'll be some positive things that come out of this.
Well, you reminding me about New Hampshire is actually kind of interesting. I did a show with Mark Edge a few weeks ago, and we were talking about some of the most free places to run away to. I know that you have sort of a crypto complex almost that you've been informally welcoming some of the kind of blockchain community into. What's your take on the whole scene in New Hampshire? Because to me, I'm a city girl. I'm very anti-remote places, but apparently now we have to go there. How do people connect when they're remote in some place like New Hampshire? I mean, maybe New Hampshire is not the most remote place also. I'm completely, biased.
It can be.
It feels that way.
Yeah, it can be. It's not as remote as some places. I mean, the nice thing about New Hampshire, like where we are, we're only an hour and a half from Boston. So you can still get to an international airport. But if you look at a lot of places, even in New Hampshire, if you go further north, or there's a lot of remote places, you can get land really cheap. But then you're maybe, 2 or 3, especially if you're 3 or more hours away from an international airport, then it just really cuts down on your ability to travel. And those places tend to be in, really small towns. We have like some cool little cities around here that are touristy, and you can have Indian food or Himalayan food or go to an art gallery. But there's a lot of really rural areas that aren't like that. And the good news is there's so many apps. There's now things like what we're doing now, and there's Zoom, and there's Clubhouse, and there's so many cool ways that people can connect now that that was the biggest thing that we're lacking, is just being around. I miss kind of, we've lived in New York City, so I've, there's some benefits of that, but there's some benefits of this too. But hopefully technology will help bridge that gap. It's easier for people to work now and do deals, and I can do a lot more things that I would have normally needed to go to New York. I can do them on the, on Zoom.
So have you seen, what's the vibe in New Hampshire? Because New Hampshire is a state, for some people, Free State Project, they move a lot of different freedom-minded, libertarian-ish people there. Have you seen a difference in the way that the state is treating Corona? Because there's a lot of complaints about the lockdowns, right? At first it did seem prudent. Now it seems like a lot of government overreach. And the hope is that in New Hampshire, they will be able to sort of push them out through political office. Have you seen, that influence, and have you seen a little bit more freedom because of it? Do you think that they live up to live free or die on your license plate?
Yeah, I think they've been pretty good. I mean, I've been happy with the Free Staters. They were, you know, most of the people in the Free State community and the many libertarians that I know here who I'm friends with, I mean, they definitely stuck to their principles. Overwhelmingly, I didn't see many people really deviate from that. They were just kind of, leave us alone and don't make the regulations. And there was some that challenged the rule that said you couldn't get together in groups. So they held a church service like the next day. They sued. They actually lost, unfortunately. I wish they would have won, but I was proud of them for doing that. I think that, and then overall, the state has been pretty good about it. It is a blue state. The governor is Republican. He's been kind of a light touch. He was one of the few governors that said early on that he doesn't think that governors have the constitutional authority to do these mandatory lockdowns. So he said very clearly that he doesn't believe that that's right. Other governors disagree, but that's good to have him limit power. So I think New Hampshire's lockdowns have been much lighter than most states, and the practice of it has been much lighter. But we haven't really had much of a negative effect from the health results of that, at least so far. The data is really hard to measure, but it seems to have worked.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, are you guys getting together? I know we have a lot of different other crypto things, but I can't help but wonder, Satoshi Roundtable, you're trying to reinvigorate it. Are you guys having in-person crypto events in New Hampshire that are, open to the public? Or do you think that that's something that we still have to hold off on? I think everybody's really chomping at the bit to meet in person. No offense to Zoom and all these online conferences, but for me, it doesn't feel the same. So I think there's a market for that. Just saying, if you want to invite us all up this fall.
I agree. I mean, I think we've historically done the Free State Digital Assets Blockchain Digital Assets Conference every October or so. And we were going to move it a little earlier this year. So I don't know, we might turn that into like a free meetup and just not charge a ticket and just kind of make it a thing. And then it's sort of, it is what it is. And people can come and socially distance. And I think we could do it in a safe way, keep a relatively small group, maybe not promote it that much. We do have this farm, which is great. So it's nice for people to come and visit. I just had somebody visit me for a meeting yesterday, and we can very easily just walk and stay 6 feet apart and socially distance. And people can come and stay here, and they can keep separate from people. So, that could be useful. I haven't really used it this summer, but it could be useful for people doing like mini, really small events, 5-10 people, a hackathon, get together and code something, or have a really in-depth discussion group with 7 people and a really narrow topic or something like that. I think it could work for that. But, most people are so busy and they're a little afraid to travel, even something simple like that. So we're playing it low key. We might do something like a meetup later, and then we'll probably do the roundtable again, as planned, but just lots and lots of precautions and lots of safety distancing and that kind of thing. And we'll see how it goes. Nobody knows what the world will look like in February. Hopefully it won't be a concern. If it gets worse, we'll just try and have good cancellation policies or something.
Yeah, I think that we don't even know what's going to happen in 2 weeks from now. I'm expecting an alien invasion. I've got my bingo card is set to aliens by the end of 2020, but in a more serious way. They're kind of softly lobbing it to us like, oh, we found these little UFOs and we still don't know.
Oh, by the way, we know this came from an alien craft. I mean, by the way, on a Friday afternoon, the U.S. Air Force, by the way, we're totally certain that this is not of this world, and it's definitely from aliens, and there's no way it could have been made on Earth. It's been made by a foreign intelligence. Just by the way, go back to the thing.
Wear your masks. Make sure you're distancing. Don't worry about the aliens. They're just coming to invade us all. No, I'm just kidding. I don't think they're
just some aliens.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what their objective is, because I think we're doing a fine job here on our Earth all on our own. Okay, so let's shift gears here a little bit. There's been a lot of change in the crypto space, and you came from, the banking world, the finance world. Can you give our audience a little bit of an understanding of what your experience was like and how you've evolved into this and what you're seeing trends-wise?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I came from a really regulated world, and then I got into crypto, and it was really refreshing because it was just a, Wild West kind of people were building and it was exciting and fast moving. And a lot of people were calling for regulation. And I was actually once saying like, no, you don't want that. It's all kinds of paperwork and all kinds of hassles. But now we've sort of seen like the full swing of the industry through a lot of iterations. And in some ways it's kind of mainstream now. There's a lot of regulated crypto things. Even the big exchanges are all sort of regulated in some way as money transmitters or whatever. And I realized that securities are. I knew securities were such a huge market, and securities is one thing that you can't really cypherpunk around because it's based on a definition, and the definition is really, really broad.
What is the definition?
So the definition of a security, it's like a paragraph, and it includes kind of any sort of financial instrument you can think of: stock, bond, debenture, evidence of indebtedness, certificates, contracts, investment contracts, collateralized debt, all this stuff. I mean, it's a big fat definition. And these are broad terms: stock, bond, these are big things. Investment contract, that's a whole thing. You hear about the Howey test, that's talking about investment contracts, but that's just one piece of the whole definition. So pretty much anything related to money that does something cool is a security. And that's the way they designed the laws. They made those laws like that way before crypto and Bitcoin was around. They purposely made the laws to be very, very broad. Basically, if you're raising money for something, for some kind of investment, you're under the law. And that's just the way it is. And those laws aren't really easy to change. It's not like we're going to get rid of those laws. We have a much, much better chance of getting rid of drug laws than we do securities laws, because securities laws, you actually wouldn't, even as a libertarian, you wouldn't want to scrap those laws tomorrow, because then like what happens to Apple and Microsoft and Facebook and Google and everybody's 401k and everybody's stocks? Like you actually kind of need the system to work. And even from a very, libertarian perspective, you need like protection of property. Like what if you just say, okay, there's no securities laws, and then Apple says, all right, well, we're taking half your shares. Like we're taking them out of your 401k. We need it. We've had a hard quarter. We're taking it. Like you can't do that now because or somebody takes your shares. Maybe Charles Schwab or your broker says, yeah, we're going to change your fee to be 20% or whatever. You know what I mean? So you do need some kind of personal protection. You need to recognize these things as property. So, I could say, unfortunately, or whatever, for better or for worse, it is what it is. I compare it a lot to the drug laws, because it's like, some people mistake that I'm advocating for regulation. I'm definitely not. If I got a magic wand, I would get rid of almost all the regulations other than the ones that, kind of protect property. But they are what they are. So you really kind of need to, there's a lot of firms that do need to be regulated, unfortunately, to do what they want to do in the crypto space.
Is there something in the crypto space that could provide an infrastructure to get us off of the regulatory framework that exists? Because it seems like that one is just hodgepodge. And I get what you're saying. You can't just tear it all down. But how do you transition into something that's a little bit more efficient?
That's a super good question, because that's what I've been sort of obsessed with, is how can you do something within the regulations? So I've looked at the regulations from a standpoint, I read them all the time. I have to for exams and, for work every day I'm reading these regulations. And I always look at them, a lot of lawyers and stuff look at them from the standpoint of what can't you do? And then how do you get around that? Now, I look at it because those are hard fights. They cost a lot of money and you sometimes lose. I prefer to look at it like, what can you do? So even a really narrow thing, I say, what can you do? So one of the things, for example, that I'm interested in is, peer-to-peer transfer. So right now, if you own stock in ABC Corporation, you want to sell it to Sally. If you go through me, I have a million regulations. I'm a broker. I'm allowed to do that. If I wasn't a broker, I wouldn't even be allowed to do that. You can't go through that to a normal person. And if Sally wants to sell shares through you and you sell them to Bob, you could get in trouble if you're not a registered broker. However, if it's peer-to-peer, so there's all these rules about brokers and exchanges and all these things, but if it's peer-to-peer, if you own shares and you want to sell them to Sally directly, you're allowed to do that. You can sell your own shares. And if you could get a hold of your own Apple shares, those would be property just like anything else, and you could sell them. Now, 40 years ago, you could have called them up and said, I want my certificate, and they'd send you a certificate, and you could sign that over to Bob. But you can't do that anymore. So what I'm interested in is things like that allow like you're allowed to do peer-to-peer. So that's really cool for decentralized exchanges. You could see a thing that works like eBay, where you have 1 million customers and they're all just communicating directly with each other, and you don't really need a broker or exchange. So when I got into this, like the most recent wave of securities tokens, I was thinking like about exchanges and stuff. And I said, well, wait a minute. Why do you even need an exchange? Like if Bob can sell to Sally and Sally can sell to Bob. So those are the kind of things I'm looking at. I don't know if that'll work or not, but I'm trying to look at those types of things to say, what's something that's allowed within the regulations now that could be bolstered with technology? And that's the $1 trillion question, figuring out the companies that are doing that and the trends and stuff. That's what's really exciting.
Is there also friction because of international law? Because I would think in the US, we have our securities law, and then another country has something else, and somebody else has a different problem. Would bringing things into the blockchain world help neutralize those issues as well? And is that something that a country can even adopt? Let's say the US government says that. The securities department says, I think you're right, buddy. How do we make this happen? I mean, is that even something that's possible?
Yeah, sort of. There is a lot of bottlenecks. So most of the bottlenecks in securities, both domestically and foreign, it's a combination of regulation and clunky legacy systems that don't work because they just couldn't do it. They didn't invent a blockchain. There's just no way to transfer securities around the world in the way you need to using these clunky old ledgers. I mean, they've been trying to solve it for 50 years. It just doesn't work. So it's two parts. The regulatory part you can't really solve instantly, but the clunkiness and the tech part, you can solve a lot of that. And then you can solve some of the regulatory part, like you just asked in the previous question about, doing things with better technology that sort of, I don't want to say avoids the regulations, but complies with the regulations in a more elegant way. So something like transferring between countries, it usually can be done right now. To go back to that example, if you had Apple stock, you could sell it to Sally in China, but it's just a little bit more tricky. There's a lot of paperwork and certifications. The good news is maybe we can make smart contracts to do that stuff. And then you have like a technology thing. So to you, it looks like, as simple as just taking your phone and sending your shares to your friend in Korea. But behind the scenes, it's this big complex smart contract that certifies it with the American brokers and finds a counterparty Korean broker and whatever the regulations are required in those two places. And that'll be really cool because then what I want to see is I want to have everything tokenized and everything with stocks and have them all be able to trade like Monero. So you can keep them on your phone. You can own shares in your Apple or your local restaurant, your favorite sandwich shop, your own business, and you can have them right on your phone and you can sell them and trade them and share it with people and use them almost like money. And you'll own something that reflects your day-to-day life. You'll own a whole mess of stocks in local businesses and big businesses. Maybe you own some Walmart. Maybe you own your favorite sandwich shop. And then you can transfer it to Taiwan or anywhere else in the world instantly. I mean, that would be the ultimate vision. That would be cool. But a big chunk of that is regulatorily, and the regs aren't going to change. But if you're smart, you can comply with them in a unique and new way.
Do you think that that's something that's limited to one blockchain? Do you think that there's one blockchain that's best suited for securities, or do you think that you'll have to have interoperability with others, in which case you're sort of, your development is contingent on their ability to also innovate at the same pace? So yeah. What do you see that kind of a challenge, or do you see that as a challenge?
Yeah, I think it's so I think there will probably be several blockchains.
Do you have a horse in the race?
Well, I'm a investment and ideas maximalist. So I go wherever I can make money, and I love good ideas. So I support everybody. I might not invest with everybody, but I hope everybody does well. And I don't like hate one coin or another coin. I think tribes are kind of silly, particularly with a speculative, risky asset. It's not like it's my favorite sports team or something, so and you don't want to be a slave to your investment. That's just bad investment philosophy. If you're doing it for fun and you're like, go team, go, that's fine. But most people are doing this because of some sort of investment component. And it's not wise to be on a team with your investments, because if your team changes or something better comes along, you need to be able to non-emotionally move on. So I like Ethereum is best for securities right now because they have the longest lead time. They have the most developers building this kind of stuff. They have the most securities, and they're furthest along. But that's always the way it is in any new market. There's always some incumbent who starts out with like nearly 100% market share. Bitcoin in securities is kind of probably the best candidate for second place. They're working hard on Liquid and RSK, and there's some exciting stuff going on with Lightning that will mimic DeFi smart contract capabilities. And then there's a whole mess of other chains, EOS, Tron, and ADA, and a bunch of others that are, sort of specifically focused on these kind of things, smart contracts, trying to be ETH killers. And then there's kind of non-ETH, Monero, Litecoin, Ravencoin, that have capability, varying degrees of capabilities for doing it. Like Monero has Tari, Ravencoin has token capabilities built right into it. Litecoin has some people messing with it. Bitcoin Cash has, I forget what their protocol is called, but there's a few different ones building on it. My hope is that I know a lot of these protocol heads, and I'm always trying to encourage all of them to do securities. But my hope is I'd love to see Bitcoin Cash do 10 really good securities and Tron do 10 really good securities. Because then we get, if we have 10 protocols, each do 10 security offerings, well, then we have 100 good offerings. And it's nice to have a protocol behind you because, people criticize EOS or Tron or ADA, whatever they don't like, but I kind of like them all, and they all have money and resources and fans. So even Ripple, who most people don't like, if they got behind a securities token, I'd be glad about that because they're going to put their resources and their money and their support and their team and their network behind it. And securities are separate from the chain. So it's like the security has to be judged by itself. A security isn't going to be bad or good just because of the chain. If it's a terrible chain, that could affect it. But otherwise, it's really going to be judged on the merits of the security itself. If Apple issued shares, that's probably going to be a good security. Doesn't matter really what chain it is, as long as it just doesn't totally break. But you want to judge it by the merits of the security.
Okay. What about a new stock exchange in Silicon Valley? Do you think that there will be a shift into sort of that kind of thing over there, or is that even a consideration?
Yeah. So the long-term stock exchange in Silicon Valley is pretty far along in their process. I mean, I don't know exactly the legal technical terms for what their level of approval there are. I'm sure they have all kinds of rules about what they're allowed to say or not, but they're definitely a real exchange. And from what I understand, I think it's the first new exchange in 50 years. I don't know what the other newest one, maybe Miami, 1969 or something like that. New exchanges don't happen much. So you have the major the major national exchanges, New York, which owns like 9 of them, New York and ICE, and then NASDAQ, which owns like 6 more. And then there's a few others that are regional, like Boston, Philadelphia, Miami, and that's it. I mean, there's not a lot of stock exchanges. There's some groups that call themselves exchanges, and they usually get in trouble. But as far as like SEC registered actual national market exchanges, there's only, a small handful. And there's only like, a very small handful of owners, because some of them, like I say, they own 6 of them, and like NASDAQ in New York. So it's a big deal to have a new exchange. And I saw the CEO speak just a little while ago, and very fascinating, like the things that he's looking at. One really neat example is he started with this question of saying, why is everybody obsessed about quarters? Why, if you're a public company and you're doing an acquisition, why does it matter whether you do it on December 30th versus January 2nd? Like, why? Like, that doesn't mean anything with your business decision. That's just because it's some weird calendar thing that you has, that says our earnings do this and that, and amortization and all, what is our quarterly earnings and our EPS? It doesn't necessarily mean it makes sense. And he said that, when a company has a down quarter, a lot of times the first thing they do is cut R&D, and that doesn't make sense either. So he's trying to create, but this is governed by rules, and you can't just go into New York and change the rules and say, nah, I'm not going to do quarterly reporting. I'm going to do semi-annual reporting. It's like, no. It's super strict. All this stuff around publicly traded companies and how they trade is very strict. So rather than try and change the rules, he just said, let's make a new exchange that allows these things. The other thing they're going to do is have commissions they're going to be higher if you hold it shorter. So if you day trade, your commission is going to be really high. And if you hold it for like 3 years, your commission is going to be really low. So very interesting experiment. I can't wait to see what happens with it. I wish there was a bunch of efforts like that.
So I'm going to ask sort of a silly question, because lately I've been having problems where I'm having a friend that wants to buy Bitcoin. And I say, oh, I want to buy you some Bitcoin. And then I have to wait on Coinbase for 5 days. And all of a sudden I'm realizing that I'm not able to send Bitcoin to a friend, even if I buy it for them, because I'm going to have to pay capital gains on it. And then they have this weird IRS ruling. And so I'm just confused as to where does Bitcoin fall on that? Because it seems like everybody seems interested in who's going to be regulating it. And it seems to still fall into a couple different categories. Do you think that that's been resolved for just the average person to be able to use it? Or are we all forced into KYC through going through Coinbase with these weird kind of things?
Yeah, it depends on the regulation. I mean, so far, Bitcoin has been treated pretty much as like cash and a commodity, and it seems to definitely not be a security.
Okay.
So a while
But
back,
sometimes people liken it to a stock. So why do
right.
people liken it to a stock sometimes and not to the other way?
I think it's a mistake, and it would be, we wouldn't want that from a regulatory standpoint in the US. If Bitcoin was a security, Coinbase wouldn't be able to sell it. Neither would anybody else. We would actually be great for us, but it would be horrible, horrible, horrible for Bitcoin and everything else. So, you have to be registered to sell a security. So Bitcoin really isn't a security. It can't be a security. There's nobody to file the forms. It just wouldn't be workable. But a lot of people mistake it because I think in other countries, the word security might mean something more like asset. But in the US, it does have a specific definition that, thank goodness, Bitcoin and Ethereum don't fall into that. Our firm procedures is we are very specific about what we look at digital assets. We look at personal tokens and NFTs and currencies and securities and illegal securities. And we, put everything into different boxes, and we say how we're going to treat it. If it's an illegal security, we don't work with it. But something like Bitcoin and Ethereum are the two clearest ones that aren't securities. So that's good, but they're still subject to IRS rules as property. So at least they're not covered by the SEC, which is great. But it still counts as property. So I don't think you can stop the IRS from anything. Even if it was comic books, the IRS would still come after you for it.
It just seems like so much work, and it makes it really unpleasant to try and, even if you want to be compliant, it just really, it dissuades you from doing so. How do you feel about the future of crypto with all of this that's in the balance, right? They've already been kind of looking at our community askance all along. So it's a good thing that we've got some people talking to the people down in DC and giving them some insights. But you've got Biden, you've got Trump, you've got an economy that could potentially, go crazy. And theoretically, Bitcoin should be our exit in case the dollar goes bonkers. So can you speak to that a little bit? What's your thoughts on what that future is going to look like? And are we going to keep getting crushed by regulation?
I sure hope that Bitcoin replaces the dollar. You can only get so crushed by regulation before it just falls apart. And I think we're unfortunately at a point like that now, especially in California. I mean, California is just destroyed, and New York City downtown. I mean, it's just the combination of regulation followed by the ultimate regulation, which was shut everything down and close all commerce. It's kind of wrecked California. And I feel like, hopefully, it's like an addict who has to hit rock bottom. Like the addiction to spending and taxing and regulation. Hopefully they'll hit rock bottom and just everything collapses and they say, "Oh, wait, we don't have schools and nothing works anymore." And then people restart and say, "Okay, well, how am I going to educate my kids? Okay, how about you get together and we'll make our own school, and a charter school comes up or something." And people solve the problems rather than government solving the problems. And then you don't need the government anymore. But unfortunately, that's a big crash and a painful crash, and it may take time. And I almost wish it would just all fall apart really quick, because then you could get on to rebuilding. What's more painful is this long, slow decline, like you saw in New York in the 70s, and what you'll probably see in California now, where just, year after year after year, more people move, and it's still crushed. And, bureaucrats only know one way to solve problems. So it's so ironic to see people look at this and say, okay, you have a big government state with a big government town and a big government mayor appointed a big government police who enforce some big government laws, and they killed a guy. Well, let's make government bigger. That'll solve it. I just don't get it. There's a lot of activists whose heart is in the right place, but they're looking at these weird solutions like, oh, I know what we'll do. We'll have Kamala Harris, who was a prosecutor who supported the drug war. Like, how is she going to solve anything? It's just a very weird way of looking at things. But eventually it can only be, so bad. Eventually I think it's got to hit bottom and then hopefully people come to their senses and start building instead of tearing things down with regulation and goofy politicians.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that one. I'm here in New York and I don't know how much they can steal. But we just printed a lot of money. What's going to happen? I mean, that's not just a California thing. So you've got the issues where people from California and New York and the blue states, not that I think that the Democrats or the Republicans are so fantastic, but the blue state people, they bring their stuff to the red states and that's falling apart. But in the meantime, you've got all this stuff. Like, is there anything that people could be doing right now to be preparing? Do you think that they should be really worrying about like the big one?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So I was giving all these talks about prepping, like in January. I'm like, prepping is important. You got to prep. You never know what's going to happen. And then, especially February, I'm like, serious, you better prep. But like now nobody's talking about prepping because the preppers are already prepped or think they're prepped and people are like, whatever. But like, it's actually more time to prep now than ever because it's like the world's never been more uncertain. If it made sense to prep would prepping 1 year ago today been a good idea? Yes. Is prepping today less of a good idea? No, it's way more uncertain now. I mean, we got some big problems and, not to get too, grim, but I mean, we could have a war with China. We could have starvation. We could have, all kinds of, we're like this close. We have a total meltdown of the economic system and you have things like civil unrest. I mean, you don't realize how close you are to things just falling apart. You go to a place like Portland and the cops are, suppose the cops quit and then all you need is like one extra thing to happen, a real bad storm or, earthquake or just one extra thing or, and then you lose communications. And if you lose, power plus communications, you're screwed. If you lose food plus power, you're screwed. So you lose kind of any of those two things, food, power, and communications, you're screwed. I mean, imagine if you lost your internet tomorrow morning, you just woke up and you're like, I don't know what's going on and nobody has internet and like you can't call your friends, your phone doesn't work. I mean, just think how traumatic that would be. You like, what are you going to do? Physically run to your neighbor and ask them what's going on? And they'll be like, I don't know, none of my phones work. Think about how crazy that would be, especially if it lasted for a few days. And there's like no news source, so people can go out of their minds really fast. 3 days without food, things start to fall apart. Same with power. And the thing is, once you lose like two of them, the other one, the power guy doesn't show up. It's like that scene in the zombie movie with Brad Pitt where he thinks the cop's after him. The cop runs right by him and grabs some baby food. It's like, oh, that's chilling. When the cops don't even care about arresting people, they're worried about baby food. Then that the situation is grim and society's very fragile. I mean, the good news is there's a lot of people who are really good at humanity always finds a way. People solve problems and find solutions. So, things get really grim and people just, the workers and the builders and the ones who aren't leeches are out there rolling up their sleeves and they'll go and rebuild. I've seen it firsthand in some of the places in the world I've been that have been hit by severe tragedy.
Yeah. What happens if the grid goes down to all our Bitcoin? Everybody always asks me that. And so my answer is, well, they'll figure it out. They'll turn it back on eventually. And at that point, you've got bigger problems than what's going on with your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And what would you say to that?
All your money's gone anyway. I mean, most money is digital. I mean, most people don't have much physical cash and physical cash isn't going to be, if you have a true meltdown like that, where the grid goes down, you won't be able to get into your bank account either. And they won't know what you have. And then it will be just as much of a mess. If in fact, in a real disaster situation like that, you might be better off in Bitcoin in some ways, because at least if you get any power and internet, you can verify your Bitcoin. Where you can't say the same of your bank. Like if we had a catastrophic crash in the Northeast where we were without power for a month and there's all kinds of civil unrest and everything, and then a month later it comes back online, we're like, yay, let me log into my bank account. I'm sure it's fine. No, you don't know if it's fine. Your bank might not exist. What if the login doesn't work? Like you're going to call tech support? At least with Bitcoin, you can independently verify, which is what, one of the most beautiful things about it, running a node and, doing your thing. That's what Bitcoin is all about. So, that from that standpoint, it is better. But either way, you're right. I mean, you are kind of screwed. You'd be better off with vodka bullets and toilet paper than Bitcoin probably in that kind of dire situation.
Well, you bring up vodka. So I've been going to the stores and I'm just curious, right? I'm a naturally curious person. So I went to a couple liquor stores recently and I had asked them, how's business? One of them was literally moving into an expanded office. An expanded space. And the other guy says, never been busier. And that was disturbing. But then I asked the gas station attendant, and he said about 30% of the people are anti-mask. And so I thought that was also interesting. I think of the mask as a little bit of the climate of the country's rebellion, so to speak, because I know that some people don't really see it that way. I don't know what the pulse is, right now with all of this internet censorship going on. I only see certain people's posts and then we all fight because that's the whole objective of Twitter and Facebook. And I hate not being able to see people in person because you just kind of forget what it's like to be human. I mean, have you found any kind of way of doing that? I know that you have your family, so that's good. What's your advice on remaining also tolerant? Like I'm anti-mask, I'm admitting it, but I am a little bit annoyed with like the people outside. For the most part, I'm tolerant, but the people outside that are wearing a mask, running in the heat, it's 95 degrees, they're all by themselves. Those people, I can't help but hate them. So how do we not murder each other while everything is falling apart because we're all cranky and we're not getting any hugs?
I don't know. I mean, I struggle with it every day trying to figure out what, how to, I think Naval talks about remaining calm is such a key thing. If you can remain calm in life, like you can kind of do anything. And it's so hard to remain calm, especially in times like this. People get triggered all the time. I get triggered and everybody has their topics. And it's very interesting with masks because, people triggered on either side. Somebody described it once. They said when somebody's really triggered and they're just acting out of their mind, screaming, either side, it's because of something else. It's because of something else that their fear or their previous trauma or they're equating you to their ex or something. There's something else, and it's not rational. It's just the what is it? The amygdala. I mean, it's your monkey brain taking over. And unfortunately, in times of stress, that happens more, and it's easier to get triggered. And there's also more things to be triggered about. I mean, it's just topics go off topic and people take it personally and there's so much politics and there's so much division now. You can't really talk about anything, political without people getting upset and, people are all looking for validation of their own thing. So I don't know if I have any, I think there's some keys to try and remain calm, having a routine and trying getting enough sleep, some basic stuff. Sleep is so overlooked. It's so silly. Like for almost all my life, I just kind of ignored it. Doctors like, oh, you need plenty of sleep. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But it actually is really, really important. If you mess up your circadian rhythms, it increases your bipolar tendencies and your ups and downs and your mood, at least with, a lot of people, with me for sure. Trying to have a routine, I think I've been actually, it's helped me for in quarantine because I'm not traveling and stuff. I'm able to have a more consistent routine where I try and do the same things every day. I try and go for walks around the same time. I try and do certain types of calls at the same times and emails at the same time. So that can be useful. And but yeah, I haven't figured out. Boy, I'll tell you, it would be really wonderful if I could figure out the key to not be aggravated with people. What about you? Do you have any tips?
I don't know. I think that it's becoming harder. And I'm beginning to feel, I've been doing activism for a really long time, almost 10 years or something like that, really hardcore. And I kind of feel like I don't want to change the minds of the people that are really closed off, because if somebody doesn't understand, give me liberty or give me death and what that means, then I'm not sure that I can really find a common ground with that person, because
Right.
my whole entire life has been devoted to this idea of freedom. I was listening to the story of the Warsaw Uprising, and how after all of these years of German occupation, the Polish people, they just rose up and they were like, screw you guys, and all about the freedom. And I was so inspired by that. And I think that seeing what's going on, I hate to make this, people don't like this, maybe they don't. I think it's actually apropos. So when people started wearing, marks that they were Jewish, it was just a little cloth, right? And they didn't think it was going to be something much worse. Now, with the mask, you can say it's just a little cloth, but some people will say that the little cloth is it's like an implementation of slavery. Some people will say it's dirtier and less healthy, so then that's triggering your life or death. And then the people who believe in the masks are like, you're trying to kill me. I hate you, you selfish bastard. So I don't know where these things are going to be able to line up, because I see those parallels, but we're really triggering on far more primal levels than before, even though there are parallels. And I almost feel like manipulated through the media. I mean, I do feel manipulated through the media. And if we don't have control over the media, which controls our minds, after a certain point, how much communication can you really have with somebody, because they're living in a reality that doesn't touch your own reality? Right. So then you just got to run, and you got to say, look, I got to get my bullets and my vodka. I'm out of here, because you're not going to convince everybody. So I don't know. I mean, it's unfortunate, because I feel like I've wanted to use my music, and especially my love of cryptocurrency and this technology, to bring people together. But I mean, even if you look at what happened in Portland, right? And with these cities where there's this rioting going on, normally I would say, I love the protesters, burn it down, but not really, because I don't really want people to burn it down. And now I'm forced with this decision where I say, should we bring in the National Guard? And all of a sudden I'm saying, yeah, F these guys, they're freaking wild. But that's not what I would have said in principle. So it's just an ever-changing landscape. And I find myself having to be more pragmatic and a little bit more like, screw you guys, I'm out of here, Yeah. And that's just, it's an adjustment. And I think it's good to be more selfishly focused to a certain extent, but I don't know. What do you think of that? I gave you a whole big speech of my mental state during COVID.
No, it's right. There is something. My wife, Carol Ann, has gotten really good in the last couple of years. With just one point, she just decided to like cut certain people off that she felt was negative. And I always try and be friends with everybody. So I was kind of like surprised with it. I'm like, what? You've been friends with that person for a while. And she's like, yeah, but they were toxic. And I've gotten a little bit better about it, but I tend to try and, to the point of, I have pretty thick skin. So I have a high tolerance for dealing with a-holes and jerks and, trolls and stuff like that. But, it does wear on you a little bit. So sometimes it's better to just, cut people. And there are people with just fundamentally different views about things who just haven't thought about stuff. And you could spend a great deal of time and energy trying to educate them, but they may not ever care, and there's certain things where it's just like, you're so far away, there's a lot of people that it's like, all labor is theft. All right. It's a long road to, I've had a lot of 2-hour conversations on that, and they don't seem that productive, I mean, maybe if it's a group of students or somebody open-minded, I don't know. But, but then on the other hand, sometimes I want to just go into a shell and say, don't even talk about the controversial stuff. But then I feel like, wow, it's such a crucial time right now. You almost have a duty to talk about liberty and, what's right. Like I made a joke about Camilla yesterday with her her record on the punchline was that she had 1,500 nonviolent marijuana arrests. And I really debated that a lot because I know I'm going to get crap from it. And sure enough, I got one or two people who sent me messages and they were really mad. You know, how dare you?
She's a horrible person. Just for the record, like I'll say it, she's a horrible, horrible woman. So yes.
Somebody said I was, so my joke was this. I said, Kamala Harris's success shows young girls of all backgrounds that they too, with hard work, can one day grow up to imprison 1,500 people for nonviolent marijuana offenses. And so I thought that was pretty funny. But somebody said I was racist and sexist for making that comment. I'm like, oh, come on, you know.
Well, I would have added that she slept her way to the top because she actually did with a married man.
I can't even say that without getting canceled. And I say a lot of crazy
this cancel
stuff.
Culture. That's it. I've just kind of had it, and everybody's going to be mad, but a couple people who still live in reality and understand that sometimes people say things, get over it, stop crying, right. Everybody, you know, I mean, I'm not participating in it. And that's why the other day I wrote my post without, the filter. But I hate the filter.
Yeah, a lot of people are glad to not be canceled. That's why Rogan is so popular. I had a guy yesterday, we were in a forum, and he starts his sentence by saying this. He goes, now listen, I don't want to offend anybody, and I'm definitely not racist, and blah, 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 but, and I said, hold on. I don't even know what you're going to say, but you shouldn't have to apologize before you, because I guarantee he's not going to say, I ain't no racist or nothing, but KKK has some point. No, they're not. He's saying something like, you know, it's like, I mean, you have to be like, listen, I'm not a racist, but there was a tweet one time that Trump retweeted that kind of sort of agreed with something I said, you know, and they're like deathly afraid of being accused of being a racist. It's like, come on, you know, and you can't say, I don't know. It's just it's a counterproductive thing led by a fringe group of Silicon Valley woke nut jobs who don't have a real world view on what reality is. And they don't talk to anybody other than people who agree with their very weird, narrow fringe view. And then on top of that, they've gotten kind of fake news and fake, you know, information that they think that the rest of America, they think anybody west of, you know, or east of Bakersfield is some kind of, you know, KKK redneck or something. And it's just a very weird thing. But, you know, that's something that's got to swing the other way too. You know, cancel culture was sort of like completely irrelevant in like March and April and right up until the George Floyd thing. And George Floyd was their excuse. They were irrelevant people who should be irrelevant, and nobody's paying attention to them anymore. Sean King and those types were even complaining like, oh, we don't have any engagement. Nobody cares about our nonsense woke agenda because, you know, they're getting laid off and we got this global pandemic. So then the George Floyd was an excuse for irrelevant people to try, oh, look at me again. I'm relevant, and let me make this a new thing. And, you know, and so you have a lot of mistakes with the movement that's kind of like trying to act like it's the 1960s again. It's not the 1960s again. It's not the fundamental issue, in my opinion. I don't even know if George Floyd died because of racism. How come we haven't heard one single thing about the cop being racist? I mean, did he ever make a racist comment?
They knew each other. They knew each other for 20 years. We didn't talk about that.
Yeah,
he was also on a bunch of drugs too. I mean, yeah, it wasn't like he was like, listen, you black guy, I'm going to get you. I mean, He wasn't just walking along down the street, minding his own business. Like he was driving a car cracked out and whiling like, I don't know. I mean, the whole thing was definitely, in my opinion, used. And I think that they're using this politeness to mentally bully people into boxes. And it's almost a combination of all my scariest dystopian novels, you know?
Yeah.
Because they're making you, well, you don't want to be racist. You don't want to be mean. You don't want to be sexist. I mean, who would want to be those things? Yeah. Right? So
just kneel down.
Just, you know, obey.
Just kneel
that's
down
fine.
and repeat the phrases. And don't repeat a variation of the phrase. Repeat the phrase we want you to say.
Well, they don't want anybody to think. And I think that it's exciting that we have all the schools closed right now, because I'm hoping that people are going to start thinking, you know, people maybe are looking at this the wrong way. You know, maybe we should be looking, I look, every single day there's something to be upset about. But for me, I've been doing a lot of personal introspection, and I feel this weird kind of Buddhist calm. And I think that we should all be looking positively toward the future. So before we finish up, we're coming up on the hour. What are you most excited about 2020 and 2021?
Well, there's this one of my favorite comic books, Sandman. They have these characters that represent these archetypes, and the one who represents destruction is this like cheerful, happy guy. And it's kind of like, so they have death and dream and delirium, and there's this family, really cool stuff, Neil Gaiman. But destruction is this big, jolly, happy guy, and I always thought that was interesting. Like, so he goes throughout history, and he's there when things are destroyed, but he's like jolly because he's also part of building. Because building is destruction. It's like even every destruction results in building. You show any city that's been destroyed to something else came, it's sometimes violent, sometimes horrible, but anytime there's an action, there's a different, maybe not opposite, but there's a different reaction. And so that's actually good news, because you have mass destruction of stuff where there's a lot of things that were due for destruction. I mean, academia, they're a bunch of scammers. I mean, who the heck are these people to look down the nose at like, oh, we're in academia, like as if that's something? You're a used car salesman, bro. You're a scammer. You're selling an overpriced rip-off product with no ROI to teenagers that they're buying with a credit card. And then once you come in the door, you sell them your own textbook for $600. Scammer. Academia deserves to be smashed into obliteration. Bunch of rip-off artists stealing from students. So, I love good professors and knowledge and a good school and everything, but hey, the institution itself has got to go. It's a bunch of scammers. And same with the IMF and the World Bank and the Davos, a lot of the Davos crowd and the World Health Organization and Merrill Lynch and a lot of institutions have
everybody's got to go, basically.
Yeah. Not everybody, but let Uber stay. Some of the new ones, but we can tear down the old and make stuff that's new. So we already have exciting work from home and students learning and Zoom and new classes and new things. So I think it's going to be a great. I think we have the Roaring 20s. We may have a couple bad years. It could even be till 2023, but eventually it's going to turn, and I think we're in for a great decade overall. I think it's going to be the Roaring 20s with unprecedented growth and innovation in drones and AI and crypto and blockchain and securities and capital markets and communications and openness and freedom. And I think it's going to be awesome. Great time to be alive. We're so lucky to be here to witness this crazy, amazing period of change.
I don't think I'm sold on drones. All that other stuff I'm into, but the drone part creeps me out. Where can people connect with you? And they're listening to you. They're like, this guy's cool. I want to work with him. Where can they connect? Can they
probably Twitter's pretty good. Bruce Fenton on Twitter. I have a website, Bruce Fenton, and the company's Watchdog Capital and Atlantic Financial and Chainstone. Chainstone owns those companies and owns the Roundtable too. So I'm pretty easy to find, and always love to connect to people. And there's more ways to do that now with videos and Zoom and Clubhouse is the next big app, in my opinion, I think. So that's exciting. And hopefully there'll be a lot more ways for us to communicate. And then eventually we'll do things in person again. I can't wait to be doing some stuff at the farm or, that kind of thing. If anybody's in New Hampshire, DM me. I'll give you the address. You can stop by and go for a walk around the farm. It's beautiful here.
That sounds great. Absolutely. We might be doing an event in Stanford coming up. So I'll be looping you in for that because that's not too far.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks so much, everybody, for listening to the Tatiana Show. Thanks, Bruce, for being so gracious and joining us. Josh,
thank you.
You're a good husband, but you're not the favorite co-host of the week because I miss you too much. And we'll see you all next time. Have a great summer. These shows will be coming out every Tuesday. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Accounting, tax, and bookkeeping stuff is the least fun thing in crypto. Most people just don't want to deal with it. At Global Crypto Advisors, we cure this headache for crypto-focused businesses. Visit globalcryptoadvisors.io today. Oh, by the way, we can also help individuals with taxes too. Visit globalcryptoadvisors.io today. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond. for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show. Thank you for listening to the Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. You are listening to The Tatiana Show. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on The Tatiana Show is intended as financial advice, legal advice, or really anything other than entertainment. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're listening to us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on or of any sponsors or any affiliate products you may hear about on this show.